Steve nocked an arrow, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He let it fly. Another arrow followed, then another, a relentless assault against the creatures of darkness. Each arrow found its mark, shimmering crystals exploding in a shower of sparks and color. The air crackled with energy, the ground trembled. Still, they kept coming. Fear threatened to consume him, but Steve pushed it down. He had come too far to give in now. He had to fight, for his world, for his life. He scanned the battlefield, his eyes darting from one shadowy figure to the next. He couldn't make out their features, only their eyes, burning like embers in the twilight. Their numbers seemed endless. Despair gnawed at the edges of his hope. But Steve refused to yield. He was a warrior, forged in the fires of countless battles. He would not fall here, not today.
The shadowy figures surged forward, their forms shifting and swirling like smoke. They moved with unnatural speed, their claws bared, their eyes glowing with malevolent hunger.
Steve gritted his teeth, his fingers dancing over his bowstring. He fired again and again, each arrow a desperate prayer launched into the chaos. He could feel their eyes on him, cold and calculating. They were toying with him, herding him like prey. But Steve was no helpless animal. He would make them pay for every inch of ground. He would fight until his last breath.
The ground shook beneath his feet. A low growl echoed across the battlefield, sending shivers down his spine. The shadowy figures parted, their ranks falling back as a colossal silhouette emerged from the darkness. The dragon had arrived. Steve's breath caught in his throat. It was even larger than he had imagined. Its scales shimmered like obsidian, reflecting the eerie light of the crystals. Its eyes, burning like molten gold, fixed on Steve. Fear, primal and consuming, threatened to overwhelm him. He had faced many dangers before, but nothing like this. This was a creature of myth and legend, a force of nature, given form. But fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. He had to focus. He had to fight.
Taking a deep breath, Steve steadied his hand and aimed for the dragon's heart. This was his only chance. One shot. Everything depended on it.
The arrow flew, a silver streak against the darkening sky. It struck the dragon's chest, burying itself deep within its obsidian hide. A roar, filled with pain and rage, shook the very foundations of the world. The dragon beat its wings, creating a whirlwind that sent Steve sprawling. He scrambled to his feet, narrowly avoiding a blast of fire that scorched the earth where he had been standing. The battle had begun. It was a dance of fire and fury, a whirlwind of claws and teeth and searing breath.
Steve dodged and weaved, his movements becoming instinctive, his every sense honed to a razor's edge. He fired arrow after arrow, each one finding its mark, but the dragon seemed unfazed. Its hide was too thick, its scales too strong. Despair threatened to engulf him once more. Was all this for nothing?
The dragon roared again, its voice a physical force that slammed into Steve, throwing him against a shattered stone pillar.
Pain shot through his body, but he couldn't afford to stay down. He could feel his strength waning, his movements slowing. He was running out of time.
The dragon loomed over him, its shadow swallowing him whole. Its eyes, burning with ancient malice, seemed to pierce his very soul. This was it, he realized. This was the end.
But even in the face of certain death, Steve refused to surrender. He would face his end with courage. He would stare into the abyss and laugh. He had lived a good life, a life filled with adventure and purpose. He had no regrets. As the dragon reared back for the final blow, a blinding light erupted from the wound on its chest. The arrow, imbued with the magic of the crystals, had finally found its mark. The dragon roared, a sound of pure agony, and staggered back, its movements uncoordinated.
Seizing my chance, I scrambled to my feet. I had one shot left, one arrow to end this fight.
He knocked it, his hands steady despite the exhaustion that coursed through him. He aimed for the dragon's heart, the same spot where the previous arrow had struck. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. The world around him faded away, leaving only him and the dragon locked in a deadly embrace. He breathed in, slow and deep, calming his racing heart. This was it, the moment of truth. With a final roar, the dragon lunged. Steve released the arrow. It flew straight and true, a silver streak of vengeance piercing the heart of darkness. The dragon froze, its eyes widening in surprise. Then, with an earth-shattering roar, it collapsed, its massive body crashing to the ground, shaking the very foundations of the world. Silence descended upon the battlefield, heavy and absolute.
I had done it. I had slain the dragon.
As the dust settled, Steve approached the fallen beast. He placed his hand on its cold, scaled hide, feeling a strange mix of awe and sadness. This creature, this magnificent being, had been corrupted by some unseen force. It was a tragedy, he realized, that it had to end this way. From the wreckage of the battle, a shimmering portal opened, pulsing with an otherworldly light. It beckoned him forward, promising escape from this shattered world. But before he stepped through, Steve noticed something lying near the dragon's heart, an egg. It pulsed with a faint warmth, a spark of life amidst the devastation.
I carefully picked it up, cradling it in my arms. I didn't know what kind of creature it would hatch into, but I knew I couldn't leave it here. I would protect it, raise it as my own. It was a small glimmer of hope in a world consumed by darkness.
Taking a deep breath, Steve stepped into the portal. The light enveloped him, blinding him momentarily. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a new world, a world both familiar and strange. It was his world, but changed, subtly altered by the events that had transpired. He wasn't alone. Standing before him was a woman, her vibrant red hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of fire. Her eyes, the color of emerald fire, shone with a fierce intelligence. She wore leather armor, supple yet strong, and a quiver of arrows was slung across her back.
You must be Steve. I've heard stories.
Her voice was strong and confident, filled with a quiet strength that resonated with Steve.
I'm Alex, and I believe we have a lot to talk about.
Steve smiled back, clutching the dragon egg tightly to his chest. He had a feeling this was the beginning of a new adventure, an adventure with a new companion by his side. An adventure that would change their lives forever.